So Walter, we finally come to this exciting segment which you called Quo Vadis Australia. And I like that. And you said it's a chance to break out of the silos, learn from the past, and open up visions of the future. So I think this is about visions for South Australia, Australia, but not just for us, but for in our region. And because Australia is very strategically placed within the fast developing societies of Asia, Southeast Asia, Pacific. So if we could discuss that, would be very welcome. Thank you.
Well, Australia, like Canada, is basically a mining economy, and the circular economy will obviously influence the consumption of resources, and the bigger the success of the circular economy, the less the sales of virgin resources could be. So therefore I think the circular economy and the performance economy are very important topics for Australia. But one of the mistakes we have made in the past is that in the logic of the linear industrial economy, we have always looked for bigger applications and bigger solutions than may be necessary. And one thing where it strikes me is Australia has uranium, and of course Europe talks very much about getting out of nuclear, but this is simply because people are not knowledgeable about nuclear. If we want to have spacecraft that leave the solar system, for example, we need nuclear, but micro reactors, not these huge things that we build, that utility companies build. If we want to have submarines, we logically need nuclear submarines. But again, these are much smaller reactors. So why did we never develop the nuclear micro reactors? And the same thing in medical treatments today. I mean, all the efficient computer tomography and similar technologies rely on nuclear technology that we inject, and that all kind of. So I think nuclear, we cannot get rid of nuclear because it's part of our life, but we should learn to use it in very small units, and then it's also the danger is much smaller. It's better manageable. But in the future, if the performance economy, where economic actors retain the ownership of the materials, of the goods and the embodied materials, they basically create their own stock of strategic materials. And so that will also almost create a dual market. On one side you have the virgin materials, but on the other side you have people like Rolls-Royce that have their own resources, and they will need much less resources, virgin resources. And so again, where are the chances for Australia to, in the circular economy? And if we look at stock management, exploiting existing stock, Australia has a lot of land, and which may not be arable at the moment, but there is one trend that is the plants that are salt tolerant, and Netherlands are leading in this, because if we can develop salt tolerant plants, then we can actually use seawater for irrigation, and that would open up completely new areas of agriculture in desert areas, not only in Australia. But the advantage of these things is that probably it will be patented technologies so you can make income from licenses instead of making income from sales of raw materials. Then the research in the what I call the era of de-alloying, delaminating, decoating has also a big potential to whoever is first to find the best solution will be able to sell knowledge instead of selling materials. Unfortunately, all our new technologies, IT, solar, photovoltaic cells, windmills, are complete disaster if you look at it from an eco-design point of view, because they cannot use recycled resources and they cannot be recycled. So one thing that if we are really talking about zero waste and circular economy, one very urgent thing is we have to learn to recycle what we consider as green economies, because otherwise they are not really green.
In that respect, Walter, for example, solar panels are sold to customers and put on their roofs, and of course they deteriorate, and we talked about the idea of providing solar services and that kind of introducing the pay for performance with regard to solar rather than selling the goods. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, if we want to be energy efficient, the first priority is always to reduce consumption needs. Yeah. So use LED lights, for example, instead of other lights. And then the second point is to produce the electricity in a green way. But solar panels, and there are some companies, at least in the States, that don't sell you a system, they install a system and you pay your rent for the system. Exactly. And then the company is, for its own reason, financial reasons, will develop ways to recycle or reuse or technologically upgrade these panels. Exactly. And so therefore, again, leave the responsibility for the problem with the manufacturer. Exactly. Ask him to not sell the panels but rent them, and then he has a big advantage from the beginning to avoid waste. Yes. But I think there is another option for the traditional mining industry, and that is pretty much revolution, that even the mining industry could, instead of selling the atoms or the molecules, they could rent the molecules. That would mean much less income in the short term, but a smaller but lasting income in the long term, and it would revolutionize the downstream activities, because a manufacturer now renting atoms, molecules, knows that he has to pay a rent until he gives them back. So therefore he will be obliged to himself rent the products, the objects he manufactures, and in order to be able to guarantee that he returns the atoms. So that may be not only a chance for Australia, but even a way to transform the whole world economy towards a circular economy.
That's very deep thinking and very thought-provoking, Walter. We were talking before about the solar and green energies, and there's a lot of discussion in South Australia and Australia about low carbon future, and South Australia is trying to have Adelaide as the first carbon neutral city in the world. So there's a lot of talk about renewable energy and energy efficiency, but the focus is largely on the direct energy rather than the embodied energy. And can you give us some insight into how perhaps that platform of low carbon and direct can be built upon to take into account the resource consumption? So if you could comment on that would be...
Well, we come back to the topic of a systemic system or a holistic thinking. If we talk about why should we have energy autonomous buildings, or what we call plus energy buildings, everybody is normally focused on the energy question. Michael Bloomberg, when he was mayor of New York, he was the first one to say, but I want all future buildings to be plus energy buildings, simply because whenever there is a power cut, and they are not infrequent in New York, then all the social services, the public services, are in a stress situation because people get blocked in elevators, in lifts. So the fire brigade has to get people out of lifts. Then the police has to do extra rounds at night because there is no street lighting. Energy autonomous buildings don't have these problems because they produce their own energy, and so therefore they can light the surrounding areas. All their equipment is still working when there is a blackout. So if we look at the wider societal implication of energy autonomous buildings, for example, we can see that we are probably, if we want to sell these solutions, we first have to understand their systemic implications. And I think that goes for all these things. Zero waste, for example, means that the waste management industry will disappear, which means the waste costs will disappear. So, and the landfill problems. So this should be the reason why waste prevention is a political priority, because waste prevention means zero waste society, but it also means that we eliminate a lot of the problems that we have today. And waste today, a lot of, also in Europe, a lot of companies still see a future in waste management. But zero waste means there will be no waste management. And if we accept that as a vision, then it completely changes the way that we attack the future policies and business opportunities.
Yes, and consider the resource preservation, as you mentioned, so that you don't end up with waste, but use the resources.
Yes, exactly.
Better.
You use the resources as a stock.
Yes, and just to comment on what you said before about the autonomous buildings, I was thinking that's a very good example of what you mentioned before of the intelligent decentralisation and more local decentralised approaches, and
well, it's like the micronuclear reactors. It goes against the grain of the linear industrial economy and its bigger, better, faster syndrome.
Yeah.
But in the self-interest of any region, I think the governments should push all these solutions for self-sufficiency, for being autonomous, even if it's the opposite of globalization. But the advantage is in globalization you're selling products worldwide. In in a intelligently decentralized economy, you are selling the solutions worldwide.
Yes.
So you are still selling something,
Excellent.
but it's no longer products. You are selling ideas and
Yes.
patterns on how to solve the problems to other people, but you first have to solve it yourself.
Yes, yes. So thank you. The vision we were talking about for Australia, because of our strategic location in Asia, that if Australia is able to embrace and test a lot of these ideas and practices, then there's Australia has an opportunity to export the knowledge, not the products, but the knowledge and services to Asia and China, and be a testing ground for some new approaches. So I think that's could be a strong
It
vision.
also means that academia, the universities, the research side will develop and will attract young people, will create jobs, and become an industry in itself.
Yes.
But it has to be very competitive, because other countries will try to do the same thing.
Yes. Well, I think that's a very exciting vision, Walter. So yes, thank you so much. And I think on behalf of my colleagues in Australia too, would like to thank you so much. And we hope to use this as a platform for further cooperation.
Well, it's been a great pleasure, and thank you for coming, and good luck.
Pleasure. Thank
All
you.
the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.